Hey, Dr. J here with another episode of Janine's Justifiables. And I am going to continue on my parenting and parenthood series and pick up where I left off at the last go round. And today I'm going to talk about protection. A lot of times we think as a parent that protecting our children just means physically, right? So we teach them how to cross the street, or we teach them how to use a knife, or we teach them to stay away from fire like the stove until we teach them how to properly use the stove, right? And that is our way of protecting them. But there's also other ways of protecting our children, and that can be emotionally or psychologically or spiritually, like I talked about in the last episode. And the way we teach our children protection is we give them a voice, right? We give them a voice to be able to voice their concerns. If they're fearful about something or someone, right, we give them the space to come to us to say, I don't like this. I'm scared of this. I'm afraid of that person. I don't feel comfortable around them, right? For whatever reason, we give them a voice. We give them space to use that voice, and we listen to their concern, right? Because that tells them, that shows them that we love them, that we're concerned about them, and that we have an open ear to hear them, right? And so you have to let your kids know that they can trust you. They can trust you. I did CPS for almost 13 years. And when I would interview children, I would often ask them, hey, what is safe? Are you safe, in the place you're at? Whether it was, especially if I had like a sex abuse case or a physical abuse case, I would ask them, are you safe here? Right? And they would say, most of the time the kids would say yes, because they were afraid of what might happen if they said no. So a lot of times, even if it wasn't true, they would say yes. And I would say, so tell me what safe means to you. And they would give me whatever it meant to them. They might say, oh, it means that nobody's going to hurt me, or it means that if I need something, I can go to somebody for help. They would give me every definition of what safe meant to the child that I was interviewing. And then I would ask the follow-up question, right? Especially if I got a pause about the safe or they couldn't really explain it. And I'm not talking about young kids, 3-4 years old, where they don't have a deep vocabulary yet. I'm talking about 10, 12 years old, where they have a vocabulary large enough to be able to explain. And so I would ask the follow-up question, and I would say, do you have anybody, or who would you call if you needed help? Right? And kids would, some would say I would call mommy, or I would call daddy, people that live in the house. Sometimes the ones that gave me pause was the kids that say, oh, I would call grandmom, or I would call pop-up, or I would call Auntie Cheryl. And I would say, okay, well, where does grandmom live, or where does pop-up or Auntie Cheryl live? And they would say, oh, Auntie Cheryl lives in Florida. We live in New Jersey, or they would say, I would call Pop-Up. Where does Pop-Up live? He lives in Arizona. And that always gave me pause, because I'm saying that's not anybody that can get to your immediate need, right? And so sometimes, if the child was old enough, especially with the teenagers, I would ask them, tell me why you wouldn't call your mom, like you live in the house with your mom, or tell me why you wouldn't call your dad. And they would say, because I don't think they would help me. And I found that to be so sad. And a lot of times when I had a sexual abuse case, children would tell me, like, I told my mom this, or I told my dad this, and they thought I was lying, or they told me to shut up, or they told me don't ever say nothing like that again, or Pop-Pop's not that type of person, And that's why I say the way that you protect your children is to give them a voice. Give them a loud enough voice. Give them a space where they can come to you if they need help. Right? And not only protecting them, but protecting yourself. shows them how to protect themselves, right? When I was getting my master's degree, I took a class on domestic violence survivors. And one of my assignments was I had to interview a domestic violence survivor and, find out the ins and outs of what that actually meant. And so the person that I interviewed, they told me that they had been in an abusive relationship for 20 years, very, very physically violent, very, financially violent, emotionally violent, everything. And they told me that as long as they were getting the brunt of the abuse, the children were safe. And I said, wow, when they said, unfortunately, the way the situation ended, it was a mess. But I remember the parent telling me, like, as long as I was the point of contact, my children were safe. I protected my kids all of them years, right? Because this person was in an abusive relationship for like 20 years. And they said, I protected my kids all of them years. And so, the way it ended was atrocious, and the children grew up. And the lady told me that she felt as though she failed. And I said, why? And she said, because when my kids grew up, my daughter started to date an abusive man. And she told me, this is what the lady told me, that her daughter wound up telling her after all them years. She said, but Mom, you showed me that I'm supposed to stick by my man. And the lady said, come to find out, I really wasn't protecting my kids. And so I just want to give you something to think about protective wise. All right? And I'll talk to y'all on the next go round.